Before Simba ruled the savannah, the true Lion King was a crippled child exiled from a 13th century African court who rose to conquer empires and defy a dark prophecy. Disney's story credits Shakespeare, not Africa's oral epic that kept Sundiata Keita's legend alive for 800 years. Why was the real Lion King's legacy nearly erased, and what else have we missed? A hunter arrived at the royal court in the late 12th century, carrying a message no one expected. He told King Magan Konfata that Mali's future rested not with the obvious heirs, but with a child yet unborn, a child from a woman marked by strangeness and strength. The king's advisors listened as the hunter described a second wife, one who would appear unusual, even frightening, but whose son would unify the land and bring greatness to Mali. The court murmured in disbelief. The king's first wife, Sassouma Berete, had already given him a son, yet the prophecy insisted only a child born to this mysterious woman could fulfill Mali's destiny. Not long after, travelers brought word of Sogolon Keju, a woman from the distant Do kingdom. She was known as the Buffalo Woman, rumored to possess an untamable spirit and a body that defied the standards of beauty. Her back was hunched, her hair wild, her presence unsettling. Some whispered she was more beast than human. Still, the king remembered the hunter's words. Sogolon was brought to the palace as his second wife, and the court watched with a mix of suspicion and fear. Sassouma's jealousy grew. The idea that her rival's child might one day rule over Mali planted seeds of rivalry and unrest. As months passed, Sogolon endured ridicule and isolation within the palace walls. Servants avoided her, and nobles scoffed at the king's decision. But the prophecy lingered over every gathering, a shadow that grew longer with each passing day. When Sogolon finally gave birth, the child was frail and silent. Doubt spread quickly. How could this awkward, quiet infant possibly become a king? Yet the griots, keepers of memory and prophecy, reminded the court that destiny often hides behind unlikely faces. Sogolon cradled her son, aware that his life was already a battleground of hopes and fears. The hunter's words had set events in motion that no one in the royal court could stop. The future of Mali now rested on the shoulders of a child marked by both prophecy and suspicion, watched by a mother who carried her own burden of expectation and scorn. Sundiata's early years unfolded beneath the weight of expectation and doubt. The palace, once filled with the hopeful murmurs of prophecy, grew cold to the child who could not walk. By the time he reached 7, Sundiata could only crawl across the packed earth, dragging his frail legs behind him. Courtiers whispered behind their hands. Servants called him the crawling child. Even his half-brother Dankaran and the children of the court jeered as he struggled to keep up, their laughter echoing from the stone corridors out to the sunlit courtyards. Sogolon, his mother, bore the scorn in silence. She shielded her son from Sassouma's schemes and the daily humiliations, carrying him on her back as she moved through the palace. Each day, Sundiata watched the other boys run and leap. Each day, he felt the sting of being left behind. The prophecy seemed impossibly distant. His father, King Magan Konfata, had died with hope in his heart, but the kingdom's patience wore thin. Some wondered if the hunter's words had been a cruel joke. One afternoon, Sogolon returned from the market, her arms heavy with baobab leaves. She found Sundiata slumped by the doorway, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He asked for a branch from the blacksmith's forge. Sogolon hesitated, then agreed. The village blacksmith, a friend to Sogolon, hammered 2 iron rods and shaped them as crutches. When Sundiata gripped the cold metal, the palace gathered to watch. Sassouma and her son stood among the crowd, ready to mock another failure. Sundiata pressed the rods to the ground. The muscles in his arms trembled. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a cry that startled even the birds from the rooftops, he pulled himself upright. The iron bent beneath his grip, but Sundiata stood. Step by step, he crossed the courtyard, sweat pouring down his face. The jeers fell silent. The boy who had been called the crawling child now walked, unsteady but unbowed. From that day, the whispers changed. The name Sogolon Jata, Sogolon's lion, began to circulate among the people. The boy who had struggled to stand would one day lead armies. The iron rods, twisted and scarred, became symbols of his will. Sundiata's first steps marked the beginning of a new legend, one forged not just by prophecy, but by pain, endurance, and the quiet strength that grows in the shadow of ridicule. Sundiata's escape from the palace was only the beginning. With his mother and siblings, he crossed the Niger tributaries, leaving behind the familiar fields of Niani for the uncertainty of exile. The journey stretched for hundreds of kilometers, winding through forests and savanna, always one step ahead of Dankaran's men. Hunger and fatigue followed them from village to village. Sogolon negotiated safe passage with distant relatives and sympathetic chiefs, relying on the whispered promise that her son carried Mali's future. Their wandering led them east through Kerouana and the highlands near Farana, before finally reaching the kingdom of Mema. Here, Sundiata found more than shelter. King Musa Tunkara of Mema saw potential in the quiet, watchful boy. He welcomed the exiles, offered his court as a haven, and put Sundiata among his own sons. In Mema, Sundiata learned to ride and hunt, to read the movements of men and animals alike. Years passed, and the awkward child became a skilled horseman and a tactician, absorbing the lessons of battle and diplomacy. The exile became a crucible. Far from home, Sundiata was not forgotten. News of his strength and wisdom traveled along the trade routes. Chiefs from outlying Mandinka villages began to visit Mema, bringing gifts and pledging loyalty. They saw in Sundiata a leader who could unite their fractured lands. Oaths were sworn over iron and water, binding men to Sundiata's cause. By the time he reached adulthood, the outcast prince had gathered a coalition of allies, warriors and chiefs who waited for his signal. Exile had forged not just a survivor, but a leader ready to reclaim a kingdom. The drums of war echoed across the plains near Kirina in 1235. Sundiata, now a seasoned leader, faced Soumaoro Kante, the Soso king whose reign was built on fear and dark magic. Soumaoro's armor was said to be impenetrable, his power guarded by charms and the fabled Iron Rooster talisman. Warriors from 12 kingdoms stood with Sundiata. The air was thick with dust and the promise of reckoning. In the chaos of battle, Sundiata's griot, Bala Faseke, revealed the secret to breaking Soumaoro's spell. The tyrant's strength was bound to the spur of a white rooster. Sundiata's arrow, tipped with poison, found its mark. Soumaoro vanished into legend, his magic broken, his armies scattered. Sundiata spared the defeated, forging alliances from former enemies. By nightfall, the Mandinka banners rose above the field. The Mali Empire was born, its capital set at Niani, and Sundiata was hailed as Mansa, the Lion King of Mali. Centuries later, another story of a Lion King would captivate the world. In 1994, Disney's The Lion King swept box offices and won global acclaim. But its credits named Shakespeare and the Bible, not the griots of West Africa. The echoes between Sundiata's epic and Simba's journey are hard to ignore. An exiled heir, a usurper's fall, the restoration of a kingdom. Yet the film's official story makes no mention of Mali, the Battle of Kirina, or the lion who united an empire. The question lingers: who gets remembered and who gets written out? Today, Sundiata's epic still lives in the words of griots, even as global media often credits Africa's stories elsewhere. As audiences demand richer, more truthful origins, what we honor and what we overlook shapes who gets to claim the crown. Whose legend do we remember next? Share your thoughts below.